You've had Wendy's Nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new Saucy Nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, and garlic parm, and of course, the hot variations of all those flavors. Or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper. I dare you. That is 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you have never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. And now I'm hungry. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. It's a Dear Andy and Ari day. We have incredible questions from you, but first we have to talk about a little bit of news. The big news on Thursday was recruiting news, but that also affects what is going on right now. A topic, Ari, that we have covered extensively on this show over the last 2 weeks. Hugh Freeze, Auburn, what happens there? Well, guess what? He got himself a quarterback last night for the class of 2025. Deuce Knight from Mississippi, previously committed to Notre Dame, has flipped to Auburn.
Yeah, we always talk about like when things are going bad, it can be a powerful recruiting tool, right? Like, you can't look a young man in the eye and say, we need you more effectively than Auburn can right now. It's always funny to me when teams are going through a certain turmoil and then there's a recruit that commits during that time that would solve that turmoil. So, I think that we have a deeper discussion about whether or not Auburn should still take a transfer quarterback because they can't find themselves in a position like they're in next year again. But to get a 5-star quarterback, you talk about, Hugh Freeze and losing, faith with fans and all that stuff. It's like there's nothing like something like this that kind of helps you forget about what's going on right now and looking forward to the future. And I think it's a monumental get. It kind of reminded me of like a few years ago when Iowa's offense was struggling really, really bad and they got a commitment from a quarterback right in the middle of it. Now that was a 3-star and it wasn't quite the same, but like it made me smile because it's like, who would commit to this right now? But I think this is a completely different scenario because
Auburn's moving the ball. They're just throwing it to the other team. And if you're a quarterback, you're like, well, I won't throw it to the other team. And I have faith in myself. But the Deuce Knight thing, there's a lot of layers to this because this is something that we've talked about for the last couple of months, has been a possibility for a while. The Notre Dame people were obviously prepared for it. Like the class of 26 quarterback recruit, they have Noah Grubbs. Shout out Lake Mary High School, my alma mater. He is like immediately commits. We stand on business, blah, 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 blah. And so there's a lot to this. Like for Notre Dame, does it mean the CJ Carr era is imminent? Like, is Notre Dame about to start a homegrown QB that they signed out of high school as opposed to going and getting somebody out of the portal like they have the last 2 years? Those things are a question. For Auburn, does this mean you go with Walker White, who you signed this year, and Deuce Knight as a quarterback competition for next year? Or do you go into the portal and get somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it all depends on, Hugh Freeze's evaluation of where Walker is, right? Like, and it is kind of a scary proposition because there has to be at least a 10% part of you that questions whether or not their coach can do that because he messed that up last year in terms of evaluating who's on the roster and whether they're ready to play. That said, going in next year with 2 kids that are really, really highly touted recruits, Walker White, not so much as Deuce, but still in a position where they should have somebody who's functional, but I do believe that they probably still should go get somebody in the portal to play next year if they don't feel 100% certain that they're not going to be able to field a quarterback who doesn't throw interceptions that kill your team.
Or you get, like, you go in the portal and you get the guy who accepts the fact that he might not wind up the starter. The Spencer Sanders situation. Remember when Ole Miss went out and got Spencer Sanders out of the portal from Oklahoma State? He went knowing that he might not start, that he might be behind Jackson Dart. And maybe you get the veteran guy who's kind of an insurance policy. Bing in the chat says this feels
which
like
are really hard to find, Andy. That's not an easy thing to find.
No,
like that's.
But if there's enough money in it and it's somebody who wants to be a coach, it's actually what Gardner Minshew originally committed to Alabama to be. And then Mike Leach called him and said, hey, come to Washington State and you can start. So Bing in the chat says this feels like DJ Lagway committing to Florida last year. No, it does not. Because DJ Lagway had been committed for a long time to Florida and just sort of hung in there. what this is what makes this interesting is this is an addition to a already pretty good recruiting class as things are falling apart on the field, which I went on the Auburn Live message board last week and said, hey, a lot of this is sounding a lot like Billy Napier, but here's how you can tell if it's going to be different or not. And one of the things I said is, do they add to the recruiting class versus get the recruiting class strip mined? So Florida's recruiting class, while DJ Lagway did sign, got strip mined last year, particularly by Auburn. Auburn grabbed some guys. Texas grabbed somebody. There were other schools that came in too. But that class got stripped away and was a shell of what it was by signing day, because that was a top 5 class at the end of the summer, and it wound up, I'm trying to remember where it landed, but I want to say it was somewhere in the low teens. This Auburn class is ranked number 4 now. Deuce Knight is the highest ranked recruit in the class in the On3 industry rankings. He's the number 36 overall prospect, but this is a good class. Jared Smith, edge rusher from Hoover, Alabama. Derek Smith, athlete from Selma, Alabama. They have a bunch of guys that everybody wants. So if they can keep those guys, regardless of what happens on the field, that's a good sign for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, and this is a lot different than the Florida situation, Andy, because I think that Billy Napier's seat was probably a lot hotter at this moment a year ago than Hugh Freeze's right now in terms of just like the end of the class and how people were feeling about the direction of the program. And then 2, like you also have to take into account like where Auburn was as a recruiting outfit before Hugh Freeze arrived. And like just looking at this recruiting class alone is just like a breath of fresh air because they weren't even involved with players like this, let alone getting them. So like this is though we've been critical of Hugh Freeze and his way of handling the on the field issues this year, I think that he said some things that maybe he shouldn't have said. I don't think there's any question that you can see the tea leaves or read the tea leaves that this program is at least headed in the right direction. Like and again, like you said earlier on the show, this isn't an Iowa situation where Auburn's team is just dreadful. Like they actually are actually okay. I think they're going to be competitive in most of the SEC, if not all the SEC games they play this year. If they had a quarterback that didn't turn it over a lot, it's possible they might have won a few more games, including beating Oklahoma. So it's not like this team is in the dumpster right now. It's frustrating, and their coach is acting in a way that should frustrate you. But when your coach who's acting in a way that should frustrate you goes out and gets a 5-star quarterback that flipped from Notre Dame, and you have guys in your class that you wouldn't have been recruiting 2 or 3 years ago, you can at least see the repair is underway. How long you give him to complete the repair, I guess, is the next part of the story. But like, I think that Auburn is doing the right things to address the issues right now. And I think that's the number one thing that you need to look for whenever a coach is taking over a program.
Well, so here's the thing. On the field, there's still some work to be done. And like I said, it's not hopeless because they are moving the ball. They're just throwing it to the other team. I think it's fairly hopeless this week. Like, I don't think they're going to beat Georgia. But they need to win at least one of the next 4 games. If they could go 2-2 in this stretch, it would be huge. It would be huge. So at Georgia, at Missouri, at Kentucky, come back home, play Vanderbilt. You got to win at least one of those. If you lose to Vanderbilt at home and Diego Pavia beats you again after he beat you with New Mexico State, I'm not sure what you can do at that point. Then you worry about the recruiting class falling apart. Then you worry about the vultures swooping in. As long as you can win one of these, and preferably if you can win 2 of them, you can say, hey, look, we're coming out of this. We got this great class. You tell the guys in the great class, hey, you're playing next year. We need you. Hold the line. Like,
yeah,
that's
for sure. Yeah. I just don't know that there could be a better remedy or, fix to an ailment than getting a 5-star quarterback right now. Like, I think that this feels better probably. And you know what, Andy, I think you need to, talk some sense into me, because I do think that I am like more in bad years recruiting oriented. I would rather see a 5-star quarterback and a bunch of kids commit to your team when you're losing than win a bunch of games that don't really matter. I know that ultimately this is about winning and losing, but like whether or not I believe Hugh Freeze is going to be successful at Auburn, whether they beat Kentucky in those games that you just mentioned really has no bearing to me. I think what has bearing is whether or not he's bringing in better players and has a quarterback coming in to save this thing. Because like what's going on with the team right now is still, part of the situation. I mean, you know what? He did choose.
Let me explain to you why you're wrong on this. Ari, I will talk you out of it.
Yeah, talk me out of it because I've always been this way. This isn't just an Auburn thing.
Yeah, this isn't Conference USA. You can't just win by bringing in better players. They play in the SEC. Everybody brings in great players. If you can't coach them on the field, you're sunk. You're hopeless. You're cooked. So you bring in all the great players you want, you're still going to lose. You have to prove you can coach them on the field. That's why you've got to win some of these games.
But if the reason why you're losing, let's break this down in a bad at math podcast scenario.
Okay.
Now, this is complicated because we have some parentheses and, we got to do some, order of what's it called when you have two equations?
Order of operations?
With
my dear Aunt Sally.
We have some order of operations to deal with because some of the roster ailments, as we've said on the show, like Auburn's quarterback situation is Hugh Freeze's fault. So like that's also under the umbrella of coaching. So like the thing here is of the percentage of the reason why Auburn is losing, how much of a percentage is it based on the roster that has been in place, right? And a lot of the roster that's been in place as a result of a coach before Hugh Freeze. And how much of it percentage-wise would you put on Hugh Freeze's shoulders?
50-50.
Okay.
Because they're playing well enough to win the games, but they're not playing well enough to win the games, so they're not winning them. But statistically, they are in the ballpark to win the games. They're there. Decisions are being made during the games that are costing them the games, and those are coaching decisions. Like Hugh Freeze said it himself. He got asked what he regrets about the Oklahoma game, and part of it was, I should have just called runs at the end. Why were we throwing at the end? We were running the ball fine. Why didn't I just run the ball? And remember, what did we say the last 2 weeks? If you're okay, if things are going well and it's working, just run the ball.
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
But if you do think it's 50-50, and the 50% that's not his fault, I would assume your think is personnel. Right. And then you address head on the 50% that's not your fault by bringing in better players. Then if you're losing 50% of the reason why to, let's say, Kentucky, like that's a pretty large percentage to fall on someone else's shoulder.
I'm more talking about Vanderbilt. If you lose to Vanderbilt to go 0-4 in this stretch, you've told us what you are. If you lose to Diego Pavia twice at Jordan Hare as the head coach of Auburn, once to New Mexico State, once to Vanderbilt, you've told us what you are.
I didn't even know that we had even... I know there was a lot of concerns about Hugh Freeze when he took the job there, right? Like, I didn't know on the field coaching on Saturday.
Concerned about the in-game part of it.
Yeah, right.
I really wasn't. So it'll be interesting to watch out. The good news is, if I were a fan, like, I don't think that there's anything that can happen. I mean, do you think that there's anything that could happen that Hugh Freeze would no longer be the coach going into next year? Lose the next 4 in a row.
You think so?
Yep. Because you'll also lose to A&M and Alabama in that scenario.
Yeah.
So don't lose the next 4 in a row. Like, that simple. Win a couple of those. You can. You're good enough.
And I don't think it's out of the question that they are good enough to be in a fourth quarter game with Missouri either. I know that's on the road, but like they could
beat Kentucky and Missouri. Yeah. I'm telling, they could go 3-1 in this stretch. Like,
they could beat Georgia. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe. Hey,
only God knows what's going to happen in that game.
Only God knows who's going to wait. That's the Vandy Alabama game.
I know. I just
Kirby Smart knows what's going to happen in this game, though.
Yeah.
What? Okay. There's another little piece of this discussion. I do want to spend a minute on the Notre Dame part of the discussion.
Yes, we do need to.
Because Notre Dame has started Sam Hartman last year, Riley Leonard this year. They've gone into the portal. They've not gone with guys that they recruited out of high school. Now, obviously, Marcus Freeman, this is year 3 as a head coach for him. CJ Carr was his first big quarterback signee as Notre Dame's coach. It seems like they are paving the way for CJ Carr to be the quarterback of the future. And if I'm Deuce Knight, I look at that and I'm like, you know what? If they really like him and he takes it and runs with it, I'm going to be on the bench a while. So let me go to the place where the job's open next year.
Yeah. That is an interesting angle to this, because I think that if you are a Notre Dame fan, you're probably wanting to get out of this cycle of rent a quarterback every year, right? Like, you want to get to a guy that is homegrown, that you picked out of high school, that you developed, that's been in your system for a few years, that can kind of flourish in there for not just 1 year, but maybe 2. Like, I don't know how much, like, I loved that Notre Dame went out and got those transfers the last few years, but at the same time, I think the mark of a healthy program is a team that doesn't have to rely on whatever's there, every year. That said, I think there's another angle to this too, Andy, that we have to discuss. And it's like, when is Marcus Freeman going to get a 5-star to commit there? Right? Like, not commit there, sign there. He's had, I think, 4, maybe 5 5-stars committed to him at his Notre Dame program during his leadership. And I think all of them have flipped out. So, like, I know that there are certain limitations at Notre Dame in terms of whether or not you're going to be able to get some of these top tier guys. I know academics and NIL and all these things might come into play, but the whole point of Marcus Freeman's excitement of him taking over was that you were going to see an increase in recruiting output. And if you've ever spoken to the man or seen the man in action, he does seem to relate and have a passion for these kids that he's recruiting. And it's just not really materializing in classes that are infinitely better than the ones that Brian Kelly was putting together. And funny enough, Brian Kelly didn't seem all that interested in being that insanely attached to the recruiting aspect of this. So, like, at a certain point, you want to see Notre Dame.
I will point out Brian Kelly's accent in the chat. Will Black is a 5-star according to us at On3. He's not a 5-star in the industry rating. So if the other services fall in love with Will Black the way our Charles Power and Cody Belair have, which if you've ever met Will Black, you should. He's insanely Canadian and also incredibly athletic for a 6'7" and 280-pound dude.
The most appropriate position
besides Notre Dame. So,
and it would be the most appropriate position for Notre Dame to sign a 5-star at, right? Like, if Notre Dame just signed a bunch of 5-star offensive tackles and linebackers, like, that would be the most Notre Dame thing ever. Like, I'm just hoping, like, I've been hoping that the skill position talent at Notre Dame would see an uptick. And it wasn't just a quarterback position, because I think Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard are probably good enough to win if you have a team around you. But the reason why Notre Dame has been so challenged when they've gotten to the largest stages in the sport this year is because they get smoked at the skill. And, like, part of the reason why is they don't bring those guys in. So, like, when you see a player like Deuce Knight committed there and he had been there for months, you're like, okay, I can see they got CJ Carr. Was CJ Carr a 5-star? I can't remember. I think he was
very highly rated. Very close, but he wasn't.
But they seemed at times so close to breaking through their artificial recruiting ceiling under Marcus Freeman, and it just slips away. And I think that's probably pretty frustrating for them too.
I think they'll be fine. I mean, you keep getting guys ranked in the 40s nationally, like. So according to the On3 industry rankings, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys in the top of their 24 class were in the top 60 overall. So
yeah, it's pretty good.
Right, couple recruiting services like those guys, just a tad bit differently. One of them pops into the 5-star ranks. I mean, it's not that they're not that far off. All right, we got to talk about a couple other things, Ari. One very interesting deal. When we picked Florida UCF, Florida was a slight favorite. And that has flipped. UCF is now a 2.5-point favorite on the road in Gainesville. Do we want to reevaluate our picks for this game? I don't think I do. I think I feel the same way about it, where I thought it was basically a coin flip going in. I think both teams will be able to score. It really will depend on how well Florida's defensive line can play that UCF read option. Colorado's played it really well. Can Florida's play it that well? We'll find out.
I mean, if you were going to lay 2 points and nothing's changed about the game in terms of injuries or, stuff like that, then why wouldn't you take the 2.5, right? Like, that's a 4.5-point swing you just got there. Like, the thing I want to analyze with you is, why are you so certain that Florida's going to score?
I don't think UCF's defense is very good. And Florida's offense is okay. It's fine. It's not good. It's fine. So when they play Tennessee next week, they're not going to score. When they play Kentucky, they're probably not going to score. When they play Georgia, they're definitely not going to score. But I think against UCF, they can score some.
Yeah. The line here is just going to maybe tell us whether or not we're going to have a long night on Saturday night. So you're going to the game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, if UCF wins this game, I think just because of the symbolism alone, that's probably where you make the move on Billy Napier. You're going to make it at some point between now and November. So you can make it after this one. You can make it after Tennessee. You can make it after Kentucky. You can make it after Georgia. It doesn't really matter. But the symbolism of it, the Florida people will be very, very upset if UCF comes into the Swamp and beats them. And that'll probably be enough for a last straw, I would think.
Yeah. I'm excited you're going. I'm happy you're going. I think it's important for you to be there, and obviously you do too because you're going. So it's going to be a good time or a bad time, depending on how things go.
I don't know that. Here's the thing: I don't know that any Florida home game is going to be a good time for the rest of the season for the people there. I don't think they're very excited about the product on the field or anything right now. I'm curious to see what kind of crowd even shows up. I think the weather's supposed to be nice, so that usually helps. But we'll find out. It's going to be very interesting. Another line that's moved that I thought was interesting. Now, the favorite is still the same, but they're more of a favorite now. UNLV. People have hammered UNLV over the week, and now they are a 6.5-point favorite against Syracuse.
Yeah, I think this is a dangerous spot, Andy. Like, I think that we are in UNLV mania right now, and Syracuse is a pretty good team.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think I laid 4.5 with you when we picked on Monday. Like, this makes me want to change my pick.
It's especially where it is, like right under a touchdown. I think if it went to 7 or 7.5, you'd absolutely change your pick. Like, there'd be no question, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just from a gambling standpoint, like getting I think Syracuse could win. So getting the plus 150, plus 170 type return on just picking them to win might be attractive at this point because the spread's probably larger than it should be.
Yeah, it's very interesting how excited everybody got about UNLV. And I kind of wonder, a team in Vegas where, a lot of the sharps live, do they have information, or is this just everybody's excited?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just remember too, 3 weeks ago, we were really, really excited about Syracuse too. You know what I mean? And exactly. I know they lost the game, but this isn't a team that stinks. So
right. They've lost to Stanford. It's and Stanford's not terrible. I mean, maybe we'll find out through the season that they are, but I don't think they are. So
yeah, I mean, there's so much to learn about Malik Williams. I mean, honestly, he's played one blowout game. Start. So how good is he? How productive can he be? I know Ricky White was excited about his production because, the ball came his way a little bit more, and, it's a very exciting situation, but I don't know that we can sit here and look at each other and say, hey, Malik Williams is going to be lighting up the scoreboard for sure on Friday night, but it is at home. I think UNLV fans are probably more bought in and excited about this team than they've ever been.
But the storyline, we're not talking about a packed house.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think that it makes me want to take 6.5 now and not lay 4.5.
Well, we'll see what happens. Rod says, Ari, take the orange. Do it. We'll find out. It is Thursday morning, which means the SEC availability reports came out last night. Lane Kiffin is trolling with his availability report. The Ole Miss one is about 10 miles long. It's basically the whole roster. He's pulling a Belichick. Where wasn't Tom Brady questionable every week under Belichick?
Yeah, I mean, what is the point of this? Explain the troll to me, because I know Lane Kiffin's always joking around and stuff, but what is he doing here to try to make people feel like some people might not play when they're going to play?
I think he's just messing with people. I just think he likes to watch the world burn. South Carolina's is a lot shorter, but two very important names on it. Lenore Sellers, the starting quarterback, and Rocket Sanders, the best running back, both questionable. Now, Shane Beamer has been very optimistic about the idea of Lenora Sellers playing. He said on Tuesday that Lenora Sellers did everything at practice. And so I think they are definitely sort of angling toward him playing here. And look, I think South Carolina can win the game if Lenora Sellers plays and his ankle is mostly healthy. I do not think they will win if it's Robbie Ashford.
Yeah. Although Robbie Ashford did come in at the end of the LSU game and throw some smoke around. So, you never know. I don't know that I don't know if I'm at the point where I'm considering this game as is Ole Miss going to lose again? Like, I still have some faith in this team getting back up after it got knocked down last week and winning the game. But obviously, which side of the spread you pick goes, because I laid the 9.5 with Sellers potentially playing. So
it's just many points. That was my feeling on it, is when we're talking about that many points, then I'm probably taking the home team, because that's a great environment. And perhaps my judgment is skewed because the last time a really super hyped in the preseason Ole Miss team came to Williams-Brice Stadium was a Thursday night in 2009. And that was the night that the Gamecocks fully embraced Sandstorm, which was kind of hilarious to me because, being I grew up a South Carolina fan, Columbia, originally from Columbia before my family moved to Florida. Like, we weren't always up on the trends. Embracing a 9-year-old Danish EDM song was very on brand for South Carolina. Like, we're going to make this our song, like 9 years after it was popular. And now it's their song. But it was, I will tell you, like, being on the sideline at the end of that game, right in front of the student section, and that, and they're just bopping up and down. It was amazing. So, I don't know. Maybe the memories will flow. The decks at Williams-Brice do sway when things get going. This could be one of those games. All right, let's talk a little bit more about this game. Go a little bit deeper. Our PrizePicks preview of Ole Miss, South Carolina. PrizePicks, of course, is America's best daily fantasy game. Download the app. Use the code Staples when you sign up. Play $5. Get $50 instantly. So the way PrizePicks works is you're picking squares. Players have statistical categories attached to them, and you decide you're going to be more or less. And so I'll give you an example. Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss quarterback in this game, his passing yardage number is 287.5. Do you think he'll throw for more than that or less than that? Lenora Sellers, there is a square for Lenora, or multiple squares for Lenora Sellers. His passing square is 161.5. The more interesting one, Ari, to me, is the pass plus rush yards for Lenora Sellers at 198.5, where if I think if Lenora Sellers is healthy or healthy enough, he's going to go more than that.
Yeah, if you are on the South Carolina side of this, Andy, then you have to do more than that, right? Like, that's, I mean, because I think that's the hope right there. Like, if you think that's what's going to happen, the thing that scares me a little bit when playing squares of injured players is that there's always a chance that they might not be able to finish the game.
You just may want to avoid those entirely.
Yeah. But I think that's the map right there. I mean, that was kind of the map when South Carolina had LSU on the ropes 3 weeks ago, right? Like, Lenora Sellers was just going crazy, and then he got injured, and then things kind of fell off the track a little bit. So, the Sellers interception square is interesting too. It's a goblin, which means it's easier. 0.5 interceptions. That one kind of stinks out a little bit too. If they think he's going to throw a pick, I don't know. Man,
I feel like when last we saw Lenora Sellers, the first half of the LSU game, South Carolina, remember, took the big lead. I think they were up 17-0, and they ended up losing that game because LSU came back in the second half. Sellers got hurt at the end of the first half. They basically, like, you get into the second quarter of that game, they are basically a triple option team at that point that has a passing game that is branching off the triple option. It kind of reminded me like 95 Nebraska. Now, obviously not as dominant as 95 Nebraska, although the first part of that game, they looked pretty dominant. But that's a pretty tough thing to stop if it's working.
Yeah.
If you're stopping it, then you're making it go 3 and out, and you're getting the ball back immediately. So that's the question: is how does Ole Miss's defense play this? Now you saw the massive Ole Miss injury report. Princely Emmanuelin was listed as questionable. So was pretty much everybody else. But Princely Emmanuelin, Jared Ivey would be the ones that I would be watching in that situation. How did they play that option? How do they handle being read? So they could be very important players in this game. And that will affect that Lenora Sellers rushing square. It will affect the Lenora Sellers pass rush square. Let's talk a little bit about Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, you'd think, had a terrible game against Kentucky because Ole Miss only scored 17 points. He actually wasn't the problem. Completed 2/3 of his passes. He's 18 to 27, 261 yards. So it's 9.7 yards per attempt. He was actually fairly efficient in that game. It's just they didn't get their run game going much against Kentucky. So I think the question is, can they run the ball against South Carolina? Because this offense, and I know I say this every time, and I'm sure the people who really listen to the show are sick of it. That offense, the old Art Briles Baylor offense, only works when you're running the ball well. If you can't run the ball, you really aren't moving it very well. And against Kentucky, Ole Miss ran the ball 29 times for 92 yards. That's a 3.2 yard average. That is not going to be good enough.
The thing that is so frustrating about this team is that you look around the way there, and the quarterback, you got Trey Harris at receiver, Juice Wells, Freescorn, one of the best tight ends in the country, Parrish at running back. Like, they have all the pieces to never not score. You know what I mean? Or never not run the ball well, or never not throw the ball well. It's like, that's like part of the reason why, we talk about preseason notions and like getting obsessed with what you think something's going to be and not being able to let go of it. And it's like, I'm having a hard time letting go of what Ole Miss was supposed to be this year. And I know they had a really tough game against Kentucky, and we think that this is a game that South Carolina can win. But I look at the names on those squares, Andy, and it's just like, how is this offense not going to score 40 points? Like, I think this every single time they play, no matter who they're playing.
Well, I'll just tell you the one that sticks out to me is Henry Parrish Jr., 83.5 rushing yards. If he goes more than that, Ole Miss is winning this game.
Mm-hmm.
That's all there is to it. If they can run the ball, they're going to win. If he goes more than 20 and a half longest rush, I think there's a real good chance they win the game. But if they are averaging 3 yards a carry like they were last week, they're going to lose again.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So, or at least, yeah, I mean, it's just that's the part they got to figure out. We talked about this with Tennessee and Oklahoma. Like, how do you learn to win games differently? And Tennessee runs that offense, but feels like the first team that runs that offense that has figured out how to win games in multiple ways. Ole Miss has to figure out how to win games in multiple ways. So I think this is going to be a tough one. As David in chat says, South Carolina coming off a bye week, just got a blueprint on how to beat Ole Miss. How impactful is that bye week? It's very impactful, especially if it allowed Lenora Sellers to get healthy. That's really all there is to it. So download your PrizePicks. Use the code Staples when you sign up. Play $5, get $50 instantly. We just gave you the secrets to Ole Miss, South Carolina. Now you got to figure out what you think is going to happen in that game. If you're thinking Ole Miss is bouncing back and winning, then that Henry Parrish more than should feel pretty good to you. If you think South Carolina is going to win this game, that Lenora Sellers more than on the pass rush total should feel pretty good to you. But we'll see. We shall see. Ari, it is time now for Dear Andy and Ari. Questions from our viewers and listeners. There's some really, really good ones. So let's get right into it. We've had this Heisman Trophy discussion, but this question from Justin attacks that in a little different way, and it's intriguing because I hadn't thought about it this way before. From Justin, as of this morning, the Heisman Trophy finalist frontrunners look to be Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, and Ashton Jeanty. What are the chances the Big Ten and the SEC get shut out of finalists for the ceremony in New York?
I think that it's relatively zero. I don't know about you. Because when you think about the other names that we've been talking about who have yet to have a important game. I mean, who are we? We're talking about Dylan Gabriel, right? We're talking about Nico at Tennessee, Quinn Ewers. I don't know.
Milroe.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe, obviously, but I don't know if Quinn Ewers has missed too much time to get back into this thing. But like, we are one huge game from Dylan Gabriel against Ohio State away from him being in the top 3 for everything.
Or a huge Will Howard game against Oregon.
Yeah, well, the thing with Will Howard, and I was on a podcast called Kings of the North with Doug Maurice before we joined up together to get my reps in. And he made a good point about Ohio State of like, if Ohio State beats Oregon by a ton, like how much is that the quarterback at Ohio State, really? Like when you think about like Quinshon Judkins and Trey Henderson and Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, they have so many important pieces on that team. I think it might be hard for Will Howard to absorb all of the credit for whatever Ohio State does. Like, I know the quarterback usually gets the credit.
Well, I mean, Jalen Milroe has Ryan Williams and Jam Miller and Justice Haynes.
No, I know, but I think that Will Howard is probably less important to Ohio State than Jalen Milroe is to Alabama. Like, I think that, like, I don't know if that sounds crazy.
I think Jalen Milroe will be that guy. Jalen
Milroe is the engine. Jalen Milroe is the engine that moves Alabama. Like, I don't know if you could say the same thing about. We'll see how they play when they play a team that has a pulse and can beat them. But
I do want to point out though, like the Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty thing, because you and I have talked about this quite a bit.
Yeah,
I did this question in the Dear Andy written version, and so I did some research on, like when's the last time we've seen any of this. So for Travis Hunter, really the NCAA allowed the 2 platoon system, which means like having a separate offense and defense, in 1965. So we've not seen any of this since the early 60s. So most of us have never seen it in our lifetimes. And even then, there wasn't anybody who was this good on both sides of the ball. As for Ashton Genty, he's averaging 10.3 yards a carry. He's on pace to carry the ball 267 times this year. No one has ever carried over 100 times and averaged more than 10 yards a carry. No one. Like Barry Sanders in his Heisman year, he broke the NCAA record for rushing yards with 2,628, but he had 344 carries. The last person who came up with something even close to this was Darrell Henderson, who had 1,909 yards on 214 carries for Memphis in 2018. Nobody else has even come close. There was an Oklahoma running back in the 70s who averaged 9.1 yards a carry. Like we've never seen anything like this. Most of us have not been alive for this. Greg Pruitt in Oklahoma, 1971, 178 carries, 1,665 yards, so 9.4 per carry. That was in 1971. So long before either of us were born.
So there's some comments
says Genty has played against absolutely nobody. Oregon is nobody? I think Oregon's pretty good. Ashton Genty dominated Oregon.
So can I ask you a Dear Andy question from Ari to piggyback off this? Dear Andy, what are the odds that neither Hunter or Genty are finalists at the end of the year?
Pretty high. That's pretty high because I don't have faith in the voters.
Yeah. Because like right now we are in early October and those guys are all the rage. But as the playoff picture gets clearer and players play in bigger games, because even at Ohio State, like they haven't even played. I think they played their first P4 opponent this past weekend. Like we haven't gotten into the teeth of the schedule yet. So like they are the early front runners. But even if you go look at Heisman odds, like I still think that Travis Hunter is 15 or 10 to 1 at this point in some books and 5. I mean, it's not like he is like the favorite right now. He's the favorite one we're talking about. But I think the difference between the favorite one we're talking about and somebody who's actually going to be in a position to win the award, like if you know how we feel about Hunter. Andy and I right now said we're both going to vote for him if this continues. But if I had to pick between him and Milroe to actually win the award, I would pick Milroe.
Right, because we don't have faith in the other voters. And then Cam Ward fits, he checks all the boxes. He's a quarterback in a power conference on a team that's good and will compete for a playoff berth like that. He obviously has a very good chance. So that's probably what's going to happen, though. I will say that the 12-team playoff may contribute to a candidacy for Hunter or Genty, possibly because of the format. Because, like, if Colorado beats Kansas State next week, Colorado can win the Big 12. If they can beat Kansas State, they can win the Big 12. Like,
for sure.
So they might be in the mix into November.
If Colorado makes the playoff, this year, I will stuff a. No, I'm kidding.
I was waiting for that 7-layer burrito to come up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I couldn't come up with another item, but yeah, we'll see. I cannot wait we get to watch that together, pal.
I know. I gotta
start thinking. We got 9 days before you're over, or a week before you're here. I got to start coming up with some snacks. Like what kind of snack? Like I got to go to the store and get us some pizza rolls and stuff.
Exactly. Mom made pizza rolls. But no, I think the fact that Colorado actually could be in the, like, if they beat Kansas State, they could be in the playoff mix as the season goes down the stretch and might be able to win the Big 12 and make the playoff. Ditto for Boise State. For Boise State, it's probably coming down to 2 games against UNLV, whether they win the Mountain West or not. And obviously what happens like with Army and Navy is going to affect them too, but they could be in the mix too. And I think that helps. We will be watching them and paying attention to them in ways that we weren't paying attention to them earlier. So we will find out. But I think that's interesting to pay attention to. But the Milroe, I think Milroe will be there.
But Genty might actually play on a team that's legitimately a top 15 team in America. Like, we don't know that yet. Like, we don't know the context of like Boise State.
Ditto for Hunter.
Yeah, right. Boise State, I think, is probably based on the tea leaves, right? Like that we can read.
Vincent doesn't understand what we're saying. What you're saying about Hunter makes no sense. If you think he's the best, vote for him regardless of other voters. Very beta energy. We are going to vote for him if we think he's the best, dummy. Yeah. I'm saying the other voters won't. I don't care what the other voters do.
For him? Did you say we weren't voting
Vincent's
for him?
Not very smart. He didn't understand what we were saying. Vincent has very dummy energy. So beta. Ari, we're betas. Oh no. I think we're enough.
I think I get called beta a lot in my life, so that doesn't really harm me anymore. Sticks and stones may break my bones.
I would love these guys to come up in person and be like, "You're a beta, dude." I'm like, "Okay, shall we? Shall we test this theory out?" Like, but they'd never do that. They would be scared. I think this is Steve in Fort Worth. When Andy stays with Ari, they're going to build a fort in the living room and sleep in sleeping bags. I mean, I'm more of a couch sleeper myself.
Andy, have you seen that meme that floats around Instagram of like it's an adult male sleepover party and there's 4 dudes laying on the couch or laying on the floor next to each other in a sleeping bag. They all have a large pizza on their chest and there's a football game on TV.
That's brilliant.
You're telling me that doesn't sound like the greatest night of your life?
That's the dream right there.
I hope that we are up eating pizza, laying in sleeping bags, and watching college football till 2 a.m. I hope that'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Next question from DD Wag. Indiana Rutgers have been 2 of the biggest surprises in the Big Ten. What are the chances each gets into the playoff if Rutgers' only loss is at USC and Indiana splits Michigan, Ohio State? We talked about Indiana yesterday. Yeah, I'm assuming you mean Indiana splits Michigan and Ohio State and wins the other games. If Indiana's 11-1, they're in.
Well, we have to consider what I still think they'd be in, but if Indiana's 11-1, they might be playing in Indy.
True, but that's not going to stop them from getting it. Like, losing in Indy is not going to keep them out.
Yeah. Well, Rutgers doesn't play Indiana, right? So I think the question is what are the odds that both get in together? Like that's the question, because
if Rutgers loses to USC, I mean, Rutgers is in the Big Ten championship game at that point. What if it's, and that's not going to be a Rutgers Indiana Big Ten championship game, I don't think, because a lot of the way the tiebreakers work is the degree of difficulty of your schedule. Like if you get down into the nitty gritty of the tiebreakers. So both of them are going to be out because Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon will have played tougher conference schedules. Michigan may not be in that mix,
but
Ohio State and Oregon would have played
a 18-team league too. It's like, how is Rutgers going to play an entire Big Ten schedule and not play Michigan, Ohio State, or Oregon. Like, it's like that is setting up perfectly for them. But you have the scenarios where you could have 4 teams that finish the league with 1 loss, and it's just like, I don't know. But we have to go through with the question, Andy, which is if they don't play in the Big Ten championship game and they're both sitting at the end of the year at 11-1,
I think they get in.
They probably both get in. I think.
There's another question down. Actually, Producer River, I'm changing up the order. Let's go to that South Carolina question at the bottom, because I actually think this is relevant to the discussion that we're having. Or do I have this? Maybe I didn't send this to Producer River. Here we go. Yes. This is from Sean. Is there a world where South Carolina loses 3 games but still makes the CFP with their tough schedule? So this is sort of the opposite of that, Ari.
Yeah.
The opposite of 11-1 Rutgers would be 9-3 South Carolina, although I would argue 9-3 Oklahoma has the same argument. 9-3 Georgia may have the same argument. And so I answered this one in the written Dear Andy column, and tell me if I'm nuts or if this sounds plausible. I said, I don't know if anybody would get in at 9-3, but if you were 9-3, and you beat 2 teams that made the playoff, would they put you in?
I think that at the end of the year, we will be discussing a 3-loss team and whether they should get in. Like, I think that that's going to happen. Like, no matter whether it's South Carolina or not, like, we're going to get to a point in the year where there just aren't very many viable options for the 10 and 11, right? Like, that just happens just naturally, because if you go back and you look at last year's playoff final rankings before they revealed the field, I think that every team outside of the top 12 had 3 losses. So, like, you're already going to be in that territory. Now, the thing that, and I'm sure you discovered this as you were doing the exercise for the mailbag, but the 3 losses would have to be, like, I feel like you would almost prefer them to lose games like Vanderbilt in this scenario, right?
Well, they
like,
lost to LSU. So LSU is actually the perfect team to lose to, because I think LSU is probably going to be pretty good, but not a playoff team.
Yeah.
So it's not
you want their wins to be
a loss, but it's a loss.
So here's who
South Carolina. Let me tell you who South Carolina has left. They play Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, Texas A&M, and Missouri. Like, there's a chance you could beat, like, so you have to go 3-2 against that group to be 9-3. There's a chance if you go 3-2 against that group that you've beaten 2 playoff teams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that if they're 9-3 with wins against Alabama and Clemson, they might get in, right? Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma, you can even do the same thing. So Oklahoma has a loss to Tennessee, which may be a playoff team. We'll see. But Oklahoma plays Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Missouri, Alabama, and LSU. They would have to go 4-2 against that group. If they went 4-2 against that group, they probably have beaten 2 playoff teams, right?
Yeah. So the games that they have that if they were going to lose would be most advantageous for them to lose would probably be losing to Oklahoma and Mizzou, right?
If we're talking about South Carolina, yes.
Because we're talking about a team that would have then beaten Ole Miss, Alabama, and Clemson, which I think is more attractive, I think, at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But also losing to Oklahoma,
Clemson
Missouri, and LSU
drop another
is
ACC game in that scenario.
Yeah.
Clemson's got to keep winning in the ACC. Like, Clemson needs to win the ACC championship.
But here's the likely scenario, because let's not do Fantasyland scenario. Let's do the real scenario.
Okay.
South Carolina is probably going to lose to Alabama, right?
Right.
Like, we can say that they're probably going to lose. So if they lose to Alabama and Clemson, who turns out to be really good at the end of the year, but they end up beating Oklahoma, A&M, and Mizzou, is an Ole Miss this weekend. We'll give them Ole Miss too. They have Ole Miss, Mizzou, and Oklahoma wins at the end of the year, which aren't eye-popping out of the head wins, but are quality, tough wins in a tough conference. But they've lost to Alabama, LSU, and Clemson. Does that get in? Like, because I think it's possible that gets in, isn't it?
You got to beat somebody that got in. I think as bare minimum, you have to have beaten one team that's getting in. I think you have to have beaten two teams that are getting in.
Okay. So South Carolina. Yeah. Well, we don't. Ole Miss will probably be out if they beat Ole Miss, right? Like they will have 2 losses with their entire schedule to go. Yeah. No, I think you're probably right about that. So they would have to beat Alabama and Clemson, both of whom would still get in, and then lose to Oklahoma and A&M
or let's say,
Mizzou.
I mean, they could beat Ole Miss and Ole Miss gets in, but you're right. If they beat Ole Miss probably doesn't get in. Missouri could possibly get in. I mean, if Missouri doesn't lose another game, Missouri plays Alabama. So, like, would Missouri get in with losses to Alabama and South Carolina, or would South Carolina get in at 9-3 if they beat Missouri?
Yeah.
I think
that the thing that we have to focus on here, though, is that South Carolina actually has the perfect schedule when it comes to opportunity of threading that needle, because they can lose to teams that aren't embarrassing to lose to.
Correct.
LSU,
Oklahoma has
A&M,
that same.
Mizzou.
Oklahoma has that same opportunity.
But they also have a lot of opportunity, ample opportunity, I'll say, to beat teams that are going to get in while also losing games to teams that aren't going to get in, that aren't embarrassing to lose to.
The other one in this mix that we didn't bring up is Georgia. Like, Georgia could be that team too. Georgia already has a win against Clemson, which could theoretically be 12-1 in the ACC champ. So they lost to Alabama, but they've beaten Kentucky. We'll see what happens to Kentucky the rest of the way. They play at Texas. They play at Ole Miss. They play against Tennessee. Like, let's say they lost at Texas and to Tennessee, or let's say they lost at Texas and Ole Miss, but beat Tennessee. They'd probably have beaten 2 teams that get into the playoff at that point.
Right. Well, is there a scenario where Georgia is 9-3 and still gets in? I think is right. Like
I think there's definitely a scenario. Yeah. Because I think Clemson's going to get in if they keep playing the way they're playing. So Georgia's already got that win in pocket. They would just need one more.
Yeah, if they beat Texas and Tennessee but lose to Ole Miss and Auburn or something. Like,
correct. Yeah.
Would that get them in?
I think it would. So we'll find out. I mean, we keep saying this with like I say that this goes back to be careful when I am saying things confidently, because I might just not know what I'm talking about, and I'm just being confident. We don't know any of this. We've never seen the committee have to deal with it before.
Andy, let me ask you this, because I like, popping in with questions myself, it just, will a 3-loss team make it this year?
I'm going to say no, but we've just laid out the path.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. All
right. I think it's going to play out that way. Yeah.
Let's go to Mr. Nanners. Mr. Nanners is an Auburn fan. I last went to Athens in 2014. Auburn went up 7 and then allowed 30+. I swore I'd never return to that town if Gus was head coach, and I didn't. Understandably, I didn't go under Harsin either. I am going this weekend. How do I survive? The way you survive, Mr. Nanners, is you go to Mama's Boy and you go for brunch and you get a cinnamon roll, because the cinnamon roll at Mama's Boy is one of the best cinnamon rolls in the world. There's also a dish, and it's funny because I was actually talking about this to producer River before the show. They've got a deal where they've got home fries covered in pulled pork with 2 over easy eggs over them, and you break the yolks and just let the yolk run down into that. It's so freaking good. They also have Georgia peach French toast. That's how you survive. Because I don't think you're going to survive by Auburn winning the game. I don't think that's happening. But that is how you survive.
Yeah. We also went to a barbecue. I went to Mama's Boy with Max Olson when we were filming this shoot last year. And we went to Doggone Good Barbecue. Have you been there?
I have not been to that one.
It's a dude who just opened up a business who used to make barbecue in his house and then just started. It is outstanding. Very, very good stuff and great sides. I'm a big sides guy.
One more. Trapeze in downtown Austin. Trappeze. So kind of mixing Trappist, like the Belgian monks who make beer, and a swinging trapeze. Get the fries They have these French fry appetizers that are covered in various things and have various things to dip your fries in. They're awesome, incredible beer selection. So trust me, you're going to get through it in Athens because Athens is the best college town in America. You're probably not going to get through it for football reasons, though. So just it's okay. You'll find ways to enjoy it. We got Randy, and I don't know if he has as much of a question as a late saucy take. Says the Texas Longhorns should be worried if they have to play a Big 12 team in the playoff. Almost any Big 12 team has a better chance of beating the Longhorns than any other SEC team, purely by the fact that they played the Longhorns for years up until now and are not as intimidated by them than any other team in the SEC. Randy, you do understand that SEC teams play Alabama and Georgia and LSU and really don't give a crap about Texas. Like, they're not scared of Texas. So
how much you even buy into the familiarity notion? Like, this is a completely new roster.
Not at all.
Like, playing them in 2019 doesn't matter.
Now LSU's not on Texas' schedule this year, but like, why would LSU care or be intimidated by Texas? Who cares? Like, they play Alabama. Alabama's better than Texas in recent history. Now, Texas beat them the last time they played, but they played Georgia.
And Texas is probably better than Alabama now, right?
Maybe. Would like to see the game.
Scared.
Maybe they should play the game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta on December 6th.
This is my face I'm going to make from now on. Every time I say anything that could get clipped by River and put on Twitter for 1 million views, I'm just going to
go. Exactly. Oh, no, he's been clipping that.
Stop him from doing it? Yeah.
He's been clipping that. Actually, let's find that. There is a great question that somebody asked from Kyle. Does Ari realize the 12-team playoff is happening whether he likes it or not?
Because that is what you want. Andy. So here's the funniest thing about that. There are over, I think, close to 1 million views on that rant on Twitter.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And if you go read the responses to that rant on Twitter, you're getting a bunch of people who are angry at me for being anti-college football playoff being a 12.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not even what the rant was about. The rant was about
you expecting people on the internet to understand nuance.
I just don't understand how the people watch the clip. I was just saying, don't be upset when teams with 2 and 1 losses are included on the bubble watch.
They will be upset because they complain about everything.
But I just don't understand how, like, I went on a rant that was like very fiery and I wanted to talk about something that was bothering me. And I like posted the rant and then like what I said wasn't heard by anybody.
Yeah. Welcome to the world of the internet in the year of our Lord 2024. Like,
I got a bunch of hate.
That's how it works.
Personal attacks and all these things. And it's like, you don't even know why you're mad at me, bud. Okay, I can't even respond to.
I don't know how to break this to you. There's a lot of people out there that are stupid.
But I also want you to know that, like, I'm 100% okay with people like yelling at me and calling me an idiot and personally attacking me if like they know what they're mad about. The thing that bothers me is when people are mad at me and they don't know what they're mad about. Because I say plenty of stuff to make people mad. Like, I don't know. It's like our guy Vincent in the chat who did the anywhere, anytime. Vincent, you would be terrified of me in person. I'm telling you that right now. I'm just helping you out here. Like, if you saw me in person, you would be terrified. He's a pretty large man. Stop typing now. Vincent, if you saw me in person, you would not be terrified.
You would probably not, but you would be terrified of me. So I'm just telling you that to help you. But there are people like Vincent who hear things and don't understand what they're hearing and then make stupid comments. And that's just how it goes. It's the internet. Like, we make stupid comments all the time. It's literally our job.
Yeah. It's like, also too, like, we're not even trying to pretend like we're right all the time. Or like, if you have an opinion that's based on preference. But like, all I was saying was, if you wanted the 12-team playoff, then embrace that Notre Dame is still on the bubble watch. I didn't say that the 12-team playoff sucks or that I hate it. Like, I've said that enough in the past, but that's not what the point of that video.
But they don't like, but the person complaining about that doesn't like Notre Dame and doesn't want Notre Dame to be in, so they're going to complain.
I know. Hey, have you ever been in a
fist fight? It's their God-given right.
Have you been in a fist fight before?
Yes.
Did you win?
I don't think so.
Okay. I just wanted Vincent to know the stats before he pulled up on you.
Well, but the thing is, here's the thing. You got to understand. I have been pounded on by superhumans. Like, I know what it feels like to get hit by a first-round draft pick over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Most people have not endured that. I don't have a problem with, like, I know how it feels, and I'll keep getting up and coming back.
Do you think
and
it's
I don't
comparable?
think most people could handle that.
Do you think getting hit with full pads on and a helmet by a first-round draft pick feels the same way as getting socked in the face?
Like, what do you think would be worse? Face. Depends on who's socking you in the face. No, now Vincent's like a professional MMA fighter, I'm getting my ass beat.
I'm not questioning that was
even
painful.
If I weigh him by 80 pounds, he's beating my ass. Like,
I'm not questioning that going through practice with your body against guys who got drafted in the NFL wasn't painful and hard. Like, I just want to know. Like,
I'm just telling you right now, you try it, Ari.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm saying
I'm not saying no. What I'm saying is it's not as bad as you think. It hurts, but it's not that bad.
Because you have your helmet on and pads. Like, if somebody just clocks you right here, like, I've never been punched
if they get you in the right spot, you're done. Your lights are going out.
I've done some things before that deserve to be punched in the face, and I've always had good friends that stepped in front of me. So for somebody who has as big of a mouth as me, like, if you like, I have a big mouth. Like, I say things to people that I shouldn't say. I've never been punched in the face, and I've never punched anybody. So, I just don't know. Maybe we could do like a bet where if you lose,
Luigi in the chat.
No, I don't want any part of it. I'm soft. I admit it. I'm not a man. I'm a beta. I'm soft, but I would like to watch. Like, if you lose a bet this year, you have to box Vincent.
Okay, we can do that. Why? Wait, Vincent's probably like Mike Tyson. Even old Mike Tyson's gonna kick the crap out of me. So
I bet you he's not. Okay. I think here's my premise too, because people have said some mean things to me this week. If you are a person on Twitter who doesn't put your real picture on there, or your entire purpose of being on Twitter is to make fun, talk shit, and ridicule people that you've never met, then I think you are the lowest form of human. And like, the person that I picture that you are could not be more pathetic in any other way. Like, I think that's the most pathetic thing a person can be.
There's probably like an 85% chance that's exactly like what you're imagining is that person.
Is exactly that
they
person.
They live the saddest little life.
And their only way that they can get any importance at all whatsoever is by trying to insult people that don't even know they exist.
But the problem is the 15% chance that it's the dude that spends the rest of his day at the MMA gym and knows like Krav Maga and is just going to turn you into a pretzel.
That said, there are I'm sure there are pathetic people out there that live sad, miserable lives who also lift weights. So you've got to be careful. Like,
Oh yeah. There's a lot of isolated loners who lift weights. That's for sure. The Venn diagram there's some intersection.
So, but yeah. Oh, anyway.
One more question from Tyler that we do need to answer. We've talked about this a couple times, but this is something that I keep getting asked a lot. So I want to make sure we've addressed it and people have heard this. So there's a potential championship controversy. No one is talking about it. And needs your help sorting it out. What happens if both Army and Navy are undefeated in conference play after Thanksgiving? So Army and Navy are both in the American Conference. Now, what happens if they're both undefeated and they're the top two teams in the American? They would play in the American Championship game. I'm not entirely sure how they'd figure out which campus they'd play on, because in this scenario, they'd both be undefeated in conference play. But assuming one was undefeated in conference play and one had one loss in conference play, let's say, Army was undefeated and Navy had one loss, they would play at Army. So they'd play at Mikey Stadium in the American Championship game. Then the following week, they would play the actual Army Navy game, which is it's called Northwest Field now. It's where the Washington Commanders play. That's where this year's Army Navy game is happening. So the actual Army Navy game, the one at the neutral site, would not count toward the playoff consideration or anything like that. So let's say the Mountain West teams wash out and it's the American Championship game that determines who's going to be the highest ranked Group of 5 champ. That game between Army and Navy, the first one, would determine who goes to the playoff. And then they would play again the following week, and it wouldn't have any effect on it because they've got to get the playoff set. Because remember, the Army-Navy game is a week before the first round playoff games. The actual scheduled Army-Navy game.
That would be kind of banana land.
Right?
Is there any possible way that I could just petition somebody in the sport, like Commissioner Saban, for instance, to just make the AC or the AAC championship game canceled and like make the Army-Navy game the game that decides it all? Could you imagine the pandemonium that would have been?
Oh, it'd be incredible. They're not going to do it because they want to have the playoff set because all the logistics have to be.
Or move the Army-Navy game up a week or something so they play one time for all the marbles. It's like Army-Navy game is one of the most, in terms of college football, the most college football thing you can think of, right? Like it's the Army-Navy game. Everybody loves watching it. The season's over. Everybody watches it.
Does a huge number every year.
It does a huge number. Can you imagine adding a playoff stake to that?
And it's snowing.
Yeah. Just guys being dudes out there.
Oh. But the on-campus Army-Navy game that determines it would be pretty fun too. But the problem is the following week, it takes a lot of the starch out of the real thing. So, yeah, I don't know. They're both playing really well. Like Navy's offense is really cool. They got the offensive coordinator from Mercer, and he's come in and just kind of shaking things up and it's kind of like a wing T mixed with the option. Like it's crazy. And then Army, remember Army was going to spread it out. They're going to go out of the shotgun. They did that last year. This year, like, forget it. We're not a shotgun team. Back under center. And they're just killing people. Their quarterback's name is Carson Daly, not spelled like the guy who was on MTV, but I do love that it's the same, sounds like the same guy who hosted Total Request Live, because I'm just imagining that guy as an option quarterback.
I love TRL, man. Those were the days. I actually, my opinion is that the 90s, and I think that was an early 2000s thing, but the 90s was the peak of human existence. Like, I don't think we'll ever get back to how happy and how great this place was when we were in the 90s.
Bryson Daly. I'm sorry, not Carson Daly. Bryson Daly sounds like Carson Daly's son.
It probably
I knew there was a Carson Daly reference in there somewhere. Sorry. But yes, if you watched Army Temple on Thursday night last week, you saw how dominant Army can be when they're playing against a team that's not it. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited to watch these guys the rest of the way. But both these teams are very interesting. So we'll find out if they're gonna make it. But that would be fun. Do you want to do one more, Ari? Do you want to celebrate an anniversary? Let's celebrate an anniversary.
Going on in my life.
This one's from Crawford. We're now 2 years removed from Paul Chryst firing at Wisconsin. It was 2 years ago this week. Crawford asked, is Luke Fickell Wisconsin's Bill Callahan? It seems to me like he's trying to make Wisconsin something Wisconsin is not.
So I have a hard time because there were times during the end of the Paul Chryst era, and I think I even tweeted it, that like if Wisconsin ever wanted to be anything more than a 9-3 or 10-2 team that got its ass kicked every time it played Ohio State or the peak Michigan teams, that it had to change part of itself. I think that meant that like you still ran the ball, but the plan that Luke Fickell had in place was my vision of what should be done there to modernize the program. So because it's not working, you have to ask yourself, is this something that just shouldn't be attempted? Like, and I struggle with that. Like, I don't know that it should not be attempted.
I think the idea is right and the execution is off. Now, what you're saying, and it's a legitimate question, is the execution impossible? Yeah. And I don't think in this era it is. I think if you have a robust enough NIL situation, then you can make it happen. You can get players you wouldn't have normally gotten. You could get, fill out the positions where you didn't normally have really good players. Keep recruiting the positions where you had good players well. Like, they've always been able to recruit offensive linemen. They've always been able to recruit running backs. Like, keep recruiting those well and then get guys that you could fill in.
Yeah.
But you got to pay for that. And I assumed when Fickell said yes to this job, because Fickell could have stayed at Cincinnati, kept winning, and waited for something else. Waited for Penn State to open, or waited for when Michigan opened. Like, I don't know if Luke Fickell ever would go to Michigan. I don't know if he could, if his body might just reject the maize and blue. But wait for Ohio. Like, if Ohio State ever opened, like, he could have sat there for a while, and he's the type of person who's patient enough to do that. I assumed when he took Wisconsin that it was because he'd been told, we'll give you the resources you need to be competitive for the Big Ten title. And I can't figure out if they did and he just hasn't executed it right, or if it's not the kind of resources you need and they've got to chip in some more.
Yeah, the plan there makes sense, though. Recruit the same guys that you always did on the lines at the running back position, and build your Wisconsin roster with the guys that you were able to recruit and will be able to recruit regardless of all that other stuff. Get a much better quarterback and some explosive receivers, and you have yourself a very versatile offense that could play with anybody. I just don't know what, like you said, is that impossible? Like, it shouldn't be. It makes sense. It makes sense that you should be able to do that.
Well, and I think Matt Rule is trying to do something similar at Nebraska. Now, Nebraska's had a long-term identity crisis. Like, Wisconsin had a very, very defined identity that I think Nebraska was trying to seek out an identity. But Matt Rule is essentially trying to do the same thing, understanding that the Big Ten West no longer exists. You've got to play a little differently if you want to compete in the Big Ten. I don't know that Nebraska's there yet either, but it feels like Nebraska's a little further along than Wisconsin on that front.
Yep. No, I'm with you. Yeah. It's but like, it's like, I got a lot of pushback from people on Twitter when I suggested that they do what Luke Fickell's trying to do 3 years ago, of saying, like, you can't change a program's identity, because if it does, then they're going to fall apart. And it's like, they're turning out to be right. Like, I thought that
our guy Big Cat, who's a Wisconsin grad, who's on Pardon My Take, he talks about this a lot, and he says, well, I enjoyed winning 9 games a year. I want to go back to that. So let's just go back to what we used to do and win 9 games a year. But what the problem is, you actually can't go back to that and win 9 games a year, because the Big Ten West doesn't exist anymore. Like,
yeah,
you could win 9 games a year doing that because you played Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Purdue every year. That's not the case anymore. Like, this year they play USC, they play Penn State, they play Oregon. Like, there will be years where you have to play Michigan, Ohio State, and obviously they had to play those before, but Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, like, you're going to have to beat those teams too. You just may not be able to win 9 games a year with this kind of schedule,
and also,
unless you do it differently.
Human nature, Andy. If you ever got back to winning 9 games a year, after 2 or 3 years of that, you're going to complain that you're losing the big games. Like, that, it's human nature. Like, if you go back to the Wisconsin teams that played Ohio State in the Big Ten championship 2 or 3 times during that 10-year period between, 2012 and 2020, I remember what people were saying. Like, I remember Wisconsin fans. I remember Pepperidge Farm remembers what you were saying. Like, so, like, it's easy to want to go, like, all Nebraska wants to do is go back to 9 wins. But they fired a coach
until
for
they
9 wins every single year. Bo Pelini, that faux Pelini account, every September 3rd would tweet, God damn it, this is not Bo Pelini Day on September 3rd. Like, it was just
9-3.
But they would kill for 9-3. But it's never good enough when you get there. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's always good enough. Your questions for the Dear Andy and Ari shows, they're amazing. Thank you so much for guiding us down the path, giving us ideas that we never would have thought of before, allowing us to tap into Ari's even more twisted mind with your twisted minds. I think the twisted mind meld is what makes it the best. Thanks again for telling all your friends about the show. We see the numbers, we see the charts, and so we know you're out there telling your friends about it. Please keep it up. And guys, this is going to be a great weekend of college football, because they're playing college football games this weekend. We will talk to you after the games on Saturday.